I am honored to present Aaron Armstrong, phenomenal agent from Nashville, Tennessee, that's going to spend the day with us. We've got an hour and a half this morning, and with that being said, Mr. Armstrong, take it away.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Thanks for letting me be here. I'm really excited. Phoenix is home to some of my favorite agents in the country. When I was first getting into some of the larger KW events, going to things like Family Reunion Mega Agent, I started to become friends with these guys, and I found out that a disproportionate number of them are from y'all's area. So I don't know what you guys are doing here to create so many cool people. I just hope that some of it wears off on me over the next couple of days while I'm here. So I want to talk a little bit today about the biggest things that I've learned from the biggest failures that I've experienced over the 10 plus years that I've been in business. And to start off, I know a lot of you in the room, I've had the opportunity to have some conversations, but I'm sure there's a lot of you that I haven't had the opportunity yet to meet and may know absolutely nothing about me. So I'm Aaron Armstrong from Nashville. I had to go back a long ways to find a photo when I still had hair, so this is the one that I like to show. It reminds me of my better days. That young guy, that young handsome stud there is me. And I've been in the business, like I said, for a little over 10 years. I started real estate right out of college. I graduated from Belmont University in Nashville back in 2003 and spent some time working in the music industry while I was in school, and quickly learned that that was going to be a miserable, low-paying lifestyle. So I immediately started looking for what else could I do that had something where I would control my own hours and be able to create more of my own destiny. And those of you guys in the room, I don't need to tell you that real estate is a really amazing opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, when I first started, I had no idea all the challenges and difficulties that I would face over the course of the next decade to get to the point that I am right now. And I can tell you we've been fortunate that we've had some success, but with every success that we've had, there have been 2 or 3 huge, massive failures, big lessons that we've learned, things that we've done wrong that we've then had to go back and figure out, okay, well, how are we going to do this differently next time? And that's what I want to talk about today, because I feel like that we can learn so much more from our failures and our challenges than we ever could from the little successes that we have. So to give you guys an overview, I think for me, one thing that would be helpful is, from everybody in the room, raise your hand if you're with KW, so I know kind of what our mix is. So the majority of the people in the room are already with Keller Williams. Those of you that are not with Keller Williams, you may have noticed that we have all sorts of acronyms and sayings and different things that if you're not here may or may not make sense. I'm going to do my very best to not speak in some cryptic KW language. But if I say something that doesn't make sense to you, please just raise your hand, let me know. I'll go back because I want to make sure that we're all on the page throughout the process. Next question is, out of everybody in the room, who is a solo agent or an agent with maybe a part-time assistant? Okay, so probably about 50% of the people. Who has a small team? Let's say total between admin and buyer's agents, 5 or less people on their team. Okay? And then anybody with larger teams in the room, say 5 or more. Okay, so a handful of those people as well. I'm going to do my very best as we go through to relate some of the different lessons that I learned to where each of you might currently be in your business. I think one of the things that I found as I was going through is the failures are comparable regardless of the level that you're at. The mistakes that you're going to make, the lessons that you're going to learn, don't change dramatically. It's maybe a different quality or a different class of problem, but for the most part, it's all going to be pretty comparable. So I want to run you through our blueprint for the rest of the day. We've got 90 minutes, and I'm going to do my very best to get through each of these points and leave a little bit of time at the end to answer any questions or go into any more details or specifics on anything that I might have brought up that you guys want to hear more about. So first thing I'm going to talk about is mindset. And I feel like that is one of the most important things that you can bring in to your day from the very moment that your feet hit the floor and you wake up. And if you don't have that, you're already starting at a disposition. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on some of the biggest tips that have made an impact in my life in terms of mindset. I'm also going to talk about failure. I mentioned this whole idea is the biggest lessons that I've learned from my biggest mistakes. And I'm going to go through and highlight a couple of really awesome stories about failure, and then I'm going to tell you some of my own as well. So I'm going to build you up on mindset, and then I'm going to bring you back down to reality as we talk about some challenges and frustrations and failures. Size matters. Don't worry, we're not talking about shoe size here. We're talking about the size of your business, the size of your goal, and as you're growing, why that's really, really important. Then the next thing I want to talk about is leverage and leads. The mastery of leverage and leads, and how those two things are the key to exponential growth as you're looking to take your business from where you are now to where you ultimately want to be. We're going to discuss compensation. One of the most common questions that I get from people early on when they're going from being a solo agent to adding additional people on their team is, how do I compensate people? How do I pay an assistant? Do I start with full-time or part-time? How do I compensate the agents on my team? I'm going to tell you how our compensation structure works. I've tried just about everything in the book, so some of the things, I'll highlight some of the things that we've tried in the past and what some of the challenges that we encountered with, but I'll also talk about how compensation can differ depending upon your market and some key things to look at based on your business, your source of business, and what your team looks like as you're identifying compensation. And then one of my favorite topics is leadership. All of you are leaders in your business, whether it's leading the clients that you have if you don't have a support staff yet, or it's leading your assistant or your growing agent team. Getting a head start on understanding what being a great leader is imperative. And I can say that because I failed miserably at this as a 23-year-old kid who knew absolutely nothing about leading other people and nothing about what it meant to be in a role like that. I made a lot of mistakes early on, so I'm going to share some of the key things that I've taken away as I've really made that an important part of my daily activities. Creating your culture. That's another thing that's really big on our team. As your business grows and it's not just you anymore, you've got to identify early on what you want the culture of that business to look like, what you stand for, what your business stands for. Because if you don't know what it is, you're not going to be able to tell the people on your team or in your business or even explain to your client why they should work with you. So we're going to talk a little bit about creating your own culture. And then at the end, for those of you that stick around and if you're all well behaved over the rest of today, I've got a couple things that you can do, and I'm going to share a couple of key strategies and systems and tips that we'll email out to you guys after the fact if they're things that you guys are interested in. So let's go ahead and kick it off. First thing, mindset. And I've started here. I'm going to move over a little bit and step out behind this podium so I can see my slides a little bit with one of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins. For me, when it comes to mindset, Tony Robbins is the ultimate. I love Tony because I think that he has spent time with millions of people on every continent figuring out what makes them tick. So when I'm trying to figure out how am I going to improve my mindset and what are the things that I can do so that I'm in the best state that I can be on a daily basis, I go to somebody like Tony Robbins. And the quote that I have up there is, what you consistently speak with emotional intensity, you will experience, you will create, and you will become. And those of you that have done bold, there's other quotes that are comparable to this. Your cells eavesdrop on your thoughts. Tony has another one that the emotions that you experience on a consistent basis will determine the quality of your life or the quality of your outcome. But there's all sorts of things like that. And one of the tools that he uses, and I'm going to share two tools with you guys before we get into talking about some of the other lessons. And the first one is called the triad. Is anybody in here familiar with this? Any of you guys follow Tony Robbins? No. Anybody? No, the triad. Okay, so you guys know a little bit about. So this may sound familiar to you. This is one of the key tools that he has, and the first thing is state. So everything is determined by your state, the state that you come into a situation with, and we have positive states and negative states. I know all you guys can think back on time where you're in a situation and the state that you were in, whether it be frustration or confusion or being disturbed, whatever it might be, was not necessarily conducive to getting the outcome that you want. Is that correct? Can you say yes? Yes. Okay, great. So the key then is determining when I'm in a state that is not supporting the outcome that I want to have, what are some tools that I can do to change it? And Tony says there's three things. And you can change any one of these three things, and it will dramatically change, instantaneously change the state that you're in. And if you choose to change all three of them, now you've really got a major change in your state. So the first one is your focus. Because Diana Kokoska tells us that what we focus on expands. What we focus on expands. So if you're focused on this client totally screwed me over and I can't believe they're backing out of this transaction and I'm frustrated and I needed that commission to pay my rent this month, the state that you're going to be in is probably not going to be conducive to doing the activities that you need to do in order to go out and find that next deal to get things back on track. So number one is focus. What you focus on expands. And you have the power. The great thing about the state is you are the only one that has control over this. It doesn't determine what somebody else is focused on. It's what you focus on. The second one is physiology. And Tony tells the story of, if I told you that there was a depressed person behind door number 2, how many of you could describe their physiology to me? Everybody, right? Are they sitting up straight or are they hunched over? Hunched over. Are they speaking in a slow monotone and kind of drag, or are they projecting their voice and are they speaking powerfully? The former, right? Goes on and on. What's their facial features look like? Drooped. What else? Down. Yeah, so you can describe the physiology of somebody. There's been studies done where they've taken people that are clinically depressed and done nothing but made them stand in front of a mirror and smile for an hour or two at a time, and it's proven that they physically cannot remain depressed after a period of time by just changing their physiology. And that's the easiest one to change. Out of the 3 things that we're going to look at, you can immediately change your physiology. So I know for me, if I find myself in a state that's not conducive to what I ultimately want to get out of that experience, I immediately will change my state. I'll stand up, I'll move around, I'll get my body going, I'll change my facial features, I'll change the way that I'm projecting my voice. Then I'll start to work on my focus. Okay, what am I thinking about? How could I think about this differently? Where could I focus my attention, my energy, and my thoughts to something that would give me a more positive outcome? And the third one is language and meaning. 2 people can have the exact same experience, but yet it can have a completely different meaning to them, right? So you have 2 people, and say they have a horrible experience and they find out that they're sick, that they've got cancer. And to one person, that can mean, my life is over, everything's done, I'm never going to fulfill all the dreams that I had, and woe is me, why did this happen to me? And you can have the same person or a different person with the same experience that says, I'm going to beat this, this is going to be my defining moment, I'm going to then, once I beat it, I'm going to be a shining star for my family, and I'm going to go out and tell other people about what I did, and I'm going to change the lives of thousands of people around the world. And there's a lot of stories like that. Well, what's the difference between those 2 people? The meaning that they attach to the experience. The language that they use to describe the experience that they were having. So I want all of you to think about when you're in times and you're not performing at the level that you want, or you're having a bad day or a bad hour in your day, you can use this tool to immediately change your state, to get back to a place to where now you're solution-oriented and you're looking for answers to situations. And as we start talking about frustrations and failures, you're going to have those times. But I can tell you, the more I've worked on my mindset and I've given myself and my team these tools to change the state that we're in, the less bad days that I have. It's very rare that I come home and I've had a bad day. I might have a bad hour, or I might have a bad morning, but as long as I'm putting things in perspective, I'm paying attention to my physiology, my focus, and the language and meaning that I'm attaching to the things that I'm experiencing, I can change my state quick enough that I don't let it run my entire day. And those of you in this business know that this can be a tough business. It can chew you up and spit you out if you don't have the tools necessary to come in with a positive attitude and control the way that your days are going to go. Everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the second tool is what he calls the blueprint for happiness. And he uses the acronym BP equals LC. And that stands for blueprint equals life conditions. That the blueprint that you have for happiness in any given area, you will be happy in that area if your life conditions match that blueprint. So what I'd like to do is have somebody interact with me a little bit here And I would like to find somebody who's willing to have me answer some questions. And I want to hear about an area in your business professionally that you are really satisfied with right now, that you feel like that you're achieving at a high level, and that you would say that I'm happy with this particular part of my professional career. Who's willing to have that dialogue with me? Not everybody at once.
I'll do it for you.
Awesome, I appreciate it. Tell me your name.
Jenny.
Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. Brave Jenny here on the front row. So tell me a little bit about the area of your business that you're really content with.
The people that are on our team.
Okay. And tell me a little bit more about that. What do you like about the fact with the people on your team?
Everybody is a hard worker,
Okay.
professional, their skills are a higher level.
Okay.
They work together as a team, they communicate well, care about being educated, and focused.
And you're all attractive too.
Someone said
That might have been your blueprint. Your blueprint is, so the things that I heard is they're hardworking, they're professional, they're focused, they're education minded, they're looking to continue to grow and to expand. So what Jenny just gave me is her blueprint for what she wants to have the people in the business that she's with. Does everybody agree to that? Can you see that she basically identified that blueprint? And the reason that she's happy with that area of the business is because her life conditions, the actual state of her business, match up with that blueprint that she identified. Everybody with me? If so, say yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So alternatively, you could have an area of your life who's got a part of their business that they want to be better, that maybe they're not content with, that they would like to see change or improve. Anybody willing to share that one? Brian.
Happy to go, Aaron.
I appreciate you.
We have a number of inside salespeople, and we're underperforming in that specific area right now.
So what does underperforming look like? How are you able to determine that they're underperforming?
We're setting fewer appointments than is goal, is target.
And so you have a specific number of appointments that you anticipated they set a goal that you, what would that be?
400 a
Okay.
month.
So you want them to be setting 400 a month, and the reason that you're frustrated is because right now they're setting some number below that, right?
We're on pace to do 260, 270.
Okay, so you're 60% or
Right,
around 60% of the goal. So Brian has a blueprint for what the success of his inside sales business should look like, and that's 400 leads, 400 appointments a month. But the life conditions, the actual side of that, is below that. So the blueprint doesn't match the life conditions. Therefore, he's unhappy or frustrated in that particular part of his business. So now you understand the formula for it. The key when it comes to mindset is being able to still be content as you are on the road to making your blueprint match your life conditions. So I'm not encouraging you to lower your goals so that everything matches up with the way that you want it to be. I'm just saying that along the path to your goals, have a blueprint that you can be happy with that's not unachievable. And the biggest area that I see this in, it shows up even more commonly in people's personal life. They say, you know what? I want to lose weight. And so for me to be happy, I need to lose 50 pounds, and I need to eat all vegan food, and I need to never have a drink, and I need to work out 6 days a week, and I need to, the list goes on and on. So they set up this blueprint that for somebody who's never done that before is most likely completely unattainable. And they've decided that since that's their blueprint, they basically put themselves into a situation to where they're constantly going to be frustrated, they're constantly going to be in a state of unhappiness because of the fact that they've set up this unattainable blueprint. So what I encourage you to do when you start looking at things, make those and statements or statements. I'm going to be happy with my physical self when I eat healthy for a day, or I choose to get up in the morning and exercise, or I modify my calorie intake. So you're setting yourself up that you're still setting big goals and you're moving towards those, but you don't have to be at the end result. So what if Brian changed that format to say, all right, 400 is the goal, but as long as we are increasing by a small number, if he's only at 60%, the chances of them getting an additional 40% when we only have 8 or 9 days left in the month is probably pretty low. So you're going to set an intermediate goal. What could we do that would put us on track to get to that ultimate goal to where our blueprint could line up with our life conditions? Is this helpful? So these are 2 simple tools, and there's a bunch of other things out there, but this triad and this blueprint for happiness are 2 things that I'm constantly focused on when we're going through times of transition, or we're frustrated, or we're trying to do something differently in our business. A couple other things on mindset: creating a morning ritual. All of the successful people that I have spent time with have a morning ritual. It normally involves exercising in the morning, because the bigger your world and the bigger your business gets, the more difficult it becomes to exercise or get in physical activity in the afternoon. The next thing is get a hold of technology before it gets a hold of you. I mentioned earlier this business can be really difficult. With technology the way that it is, sometimes people have an expectation that you're on call all the time, and the technology supports that sort of mentality. So one thing that I always encourage people to do is to get real clear on how you're going to use technology, when you're going to work, and when you're not going to work. Because the busier you get, until you start to add leverage, you will find yourself in a situation to where you probably have enough work to do all day long for the next month or so and still not to get to everything on your would like to do list. So for me, I was telling some people this at dinner last night, is I don't get any of my emails. 100% of my emails go directly to one of my virtual assistants. And that goes into her inbox, and then she looks at those, and you all know probably, what, 50, 60% of the stuff that you get is just junk. It's spam, it's agents inviting you to their agent open house, or somebody sending you some funny cartoon or video or link to things that you don't really need to be working on or looking at, especially when you're working on your business. So she filters all that stuff out. Anything that's a lead she sends to our sales team. Anything that's administrative-wise gets sent to my admin team, and I'm left with only the things that physically require my response. And the cool thing about that is I went from probably getting 150 to 200 emails a day to getting down to about 20 emails a day, 25 emails a day, which was a much more manageable way. And now I can take 1 or 2 times a day. I can check to see if anything urgent comes in, they'll text me or call me. Hey, something came in, and I know you probably haven't checked email yet, but go check it right now. I think you need to deal with this. So I've got those systems in place, but it keeps me from having to constantly be in front of my email all day, every day, and being distracted from that. I turned off all my notifications on my phone. My phone doesn't beep when I get a text message or when I get a Facebook notification. Who in here has read The One Thing? Anybody read Gary's book, The One Thing? He talks a lot about, if you haven't read it, I strongly encourage you to get it. It's probably the book that's made the biggest impact on my life and my business and my relationships, even, from anything that I've ever read, and I love to read. So I would strongly encourage you, if you've read it, read it again. I've read it 4 times, and we read it just about every year with our team because I'm constantly picking up something different from it. But one of the things I learned from that is turn off all your notifications. Don't put yourself in a situation where when you need to do something that's mission critical, that's really important, that you're getting distracted every couple minutes from a notification coming in or a phone call happening. For those of you that I got to have dinner with a couple people last night, how many times did I pick up my phone or look at my phone in the 2.5 hours that we were together?
Every 5 minutes.
Honestly,
No, not at all.
not at once, not a single time. And now part of that was because it was later in the evening, but even during the day, if you ask my staff or you ask the people that I interact with, I choose to respond to incoming messages and calls when I choose to, not when people try to reach out to me. So get a hold of technology before it gets a hold of you. Anybody ever done any research on Warren Buffett or read anything about Buffett? Warren Buffett is the greatest investor of all time. And one of the fascinating things that I learned about him is how he spends his day. And at the level that he's at now, he estimates that he spends 80% of his time thinking and reading, processing new information, deciding how it might interact in an investment that he's going to make, learning new concepts. One of the things that I read said that he and his partners consume individually on days as many as 600 pages of new material in a single day. Now, most of us are not at the levels in our business that we can do that, but take what you can from that and leave some time out in your day during that morning ritual that you're creating to sit down and think about your business. Think about the challenges that you're facing. Think about the one thing that you could do that would make an impact on that, and then put a plan together to do it. A lot of us, from the time we get up in the morning, we've got a million things on our plate. We're thinking about all sorts of different things, and it becomes really difficult to actually sit down and process what we have to do because we immediately start to do instead of think about what we need to do. So take a lesson from Warren Buffett and spend a little time thinking each morning. And then this last one is probably the most important one out of all of them. Choose your friends and your peers wisely. The people that you hang out with and the people that you learn from are going to have a direct reflection on the quality of your business and the quality of your life. And I know a lot of you guys are with KW and some of you guys are not, but that is, I get the question all the time, okay, well at the level that you are in your business, why KW? Why not have your own independent company? Or why not go out and work for somebody that's maybe just as low or flat fee and you could save X thousands of dollars a year? And for me, the answer is simple. It's the relationships that I have and the things that I've learned from being a part of being able to have conversations with some of the top thinkers in this industry. I've been fortunate enough that I've gotten to spend some time in a small group with people like Gary Keller and Mark Willis, and I know there are other people in the room that have had that. And I can honestly say that those two men have affected my life more than anybody else on the planet. So to be around people like that and get to hang out, you guys are fortunate that in the Phoenix market, you have some huge, awesome agents, and I know a lot of them teach classes and do mentoring and help other agents out, and I hear the stories from you. So whether you're with KW or not, make sure that you're lining yourself up with people that have similar visions, that want to accomplish big goals, and that have already been there. Go out and seek to, I know for me, when we were doing, and the whole thing today was from 80 deals to 225 deals in 2 years. Well, a big part of that was the people that I started spending time with. I was seeking out people to build relationships with that I knew were already doing what I wanted to do, and I was figuring out what they were doing so I could go back and implement it. Because there is really no new in this business. What you need to do is go out and find the things that people are doing to succeed and figure out which of those apply to you or that work for your personality style or what you want to do, and go and implement that. So choose your friends and your peers wisely. Now let's move into a little bit about failure and frustration. Tony Robbins says, when you're confused, you're about to learn something. And when you're frustrated, you're about to have a breakthrough. So because of that, he says you need to celebrate frustration and celebrate confusion. And the key is to not stay in frustration, but to use the tools from the triad to then figure out what the next step or the solution is to get you to where you ultimately want to go. One of the things that he said, which I thought was great, he said, people think that their biggest problem is that they shouldn't have any problems. They're frustrated that they have an issue when you're always going to have problems. Even the top, when I talk to some of the top business leaders or the top agents in the country, they still have problems. I think what separates them is their willingness to accept that frustration or accept the failure that they've had, take a step back, learn from it, and then go from there. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes. A couple years ago, I think it was 2012, family reunion, Gary Keller did about an hour-and-a-half talk on failures. Was anybody there for that? So good. A lot of you haven't heard this, and this will be new for a lot of you. And there are all these awesome stories of failure. And so I could spend the rest of the time highlighting failures and then of people that we think as world-class, and sometimes you don't know the struggles that they went to in order to get where they are. I'm just going to share a couple of them, but I think as we talk about the importance of failure, sometimes when you see some of the big things that have happened in other people that are successful in life, it makes it that much easier when you look at your problems and say, you know what, this is not that big of a deal. What can I do to get past this? So Michael Jordan, most of you probably heard the story that Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team. Did not make his high school basketball team. So what would have happened if he then decided, well, you know what, obviously I'm not fit to play basketball, I couldn't even make my high school team, I guess I need to go ahead and find another sport or another hobby. He wouldn't have had all those championship rings on his hand, and his brand wouldn't be grossing over $2.5 billion annually. The Jordan brand goes for $2.5 billion annually from a guy who didn't make a high school basketball team. Bill Gates. We all know Bill Gates as the founder of Microsoft, one of the wealthiest men in the world. Actually, as of last year, was the wealthiest man in the world. He dropped out of Harvard and started a failed business collecting traffic data. That was his first startup business, traffic data. Failed miserably, didn't make any money, they shut it down. He learned from that, ultimately started Microsoft, and now he's the richest man on the planet with a net worth of over $75 billion. Oprah Winfrey, fired from her first job as a television anchor. And that's the one that they talk about publicly, but has anybody read Oprah's book or know anything about her childhood and how she kind of started? Yeah? It's dark. It is really dark. She was sexually abused by 3 people close to her, a cousin, an uncle, and a family friend before she was 10 years old. She got pregnant when she was 14, kept it from her dad for 7 months, and when she sat down to talk to him, it was such a heated conversation that she went into early labor. The baby was born and died a week or 2 later. So this is a woman who early on, dropped out of school, had all these crazy experiences. If you think about what a childhood like that would have been like, it would have been really easy to say, you know what, success is probably not meant for me. I've encountered all these challenges and her falling through the crack. Instead, she's one of the top five self-made women on the planet with over $3 billion in net worth. Walt Disney. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor for lacking imagination. Now, when you think of Walt Disney and all the great things that Disney has done, a lack of imagination is not one of the first things that I would think of to describe a man like that. So he took that experience, he learned from it, and now Disney company has more Oscar awards and nominations than any other person or company in history. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, a lot of you maybe read the book or seen one of the movies, that Steve Jobs was forced out of his own company by one of the board of directors and was basically exiled for over a decade. That's when he went and he started, he took over Pixar, and he started Next, and some of those companies later got acquired by Apple. He came back in, but he talks about that level of frustration, that he's basically worked his whole life to build this business, and then overnight he's gone, and he's gone for a 10-year period. Well, instead of giving up, or just because he probably could have just lived off of the money that the company was generating, he came back in, he learned from the failures that they experienced, and he created now what is the most valuable company in the world with a market cap of over $700 billion. J.K. Rowling was a single mom living off welfare, and now she's the first billion-dollar author. $1 billion from books. The Harry Potter books are obviously the most popular book series of all times, and this coming from a woman who was really living pretty transiently off of public assistance. A couple Gary Keller quotes on failure to sum this part up is, when you succeed, you celebrate, and when you fail, you ponder. And that's why he says that it's so important for us to get comfortable experiencing failure. Because when we have a big success, or when we hit that goal, or when we get to that next milestone, we tend to celebrate. We give each other high fives, we get excited that we've reached it, and there's oftentimes not a lot to learn from that experience. But when we fail, we ponder, and we step back and we figure, what are we going to do differently? How could we change this the next time? Where did we go wrong in the first time through? And that is an incredibly valuable lesson. You don't succeed your way to success, you fail your way. And that is proven in these stories. And like I said, I could have gone on for hours and hours. All these people that you think about as some of those most successful people in the world, whether it be politicians or business people or athletes or actors, they've all experienced massive failure on their way to success. And experiencing failure doesn't make you a failure unless you quit. That was one of the things that Gary told us that I thought was great. He said, just because you experience failure in your life doesn't mean you're a failure. That only happens when you stop trying and you don't get back up and go to the next level. So before we get into the next section, I'll tell you a little bit more about my business. As I said before, I started right out of school, and we had gotten to a point where it was me, one assistant, and one agent, one additional agent. And those weren't the first people I hired, and we'll talk more about that when we get through leverage. But I had a couple people on my team, and we were kind of stuck at that 80 to 85 deals a year mark. We had gotten to that level. We really wanted to break through to 100, and we're going to talk a little bit when we get into mastering leads and mastering leverage, what that breakthrough took. But to go on with the stories about some of the challenges that we faced, so we get to 125 transactions the next year. We were able to go out and get some more lead sources. We started adding people. We implemented the showing system model to our business. So we were adding leverage. We were growing. And the next year we went from 125 deals to 226 deals. And there's a lot of failure, a lot of mistakes made along that. That's a huge percentage of growth to go through in a short time period. But our company is filled with stories like that. Filled with young people that come into the business and 4 or 5 years later have built these massive businesses because they're incredible implementers. They go out and see what other people are doing, they implement that in their own life, in their own world, and they build these huge businesses. So we had a pretty good run of success over that next year. We got 226 transactions. I'm working less in the business. I'm not actively working with clients, and things are pretty good. But I had built that business around one key person on my team. And at that point, that person had some personal things that came up that they had to go deal with, which pulled them out of the business for a while. And when they came back from that, they determined, you know what, I need a different pace of things, and I decided that I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to go out and start my own team. And I know a lot of you guys had that experience. People leave. They're not necessarily going to stay with you forever. The problem for me was that I had hired pretty much everybody else on my team was either related to her or was, a close friend of hers. So I found myself in a situation that over about a 6 to 8 month period, from somebody needing to step out and be out of the business for a while to then getting into a point to where my entire team transitioned. We went from a team of 8 to a team of 2 in a short period of time. And by the way, while this was going on, I had my first child. For those of you that had kids know that that certainly doesn't complicate things at all, right? That doesn't make it any more difficult. And at the time, when this is really starting to all unravel and unfold, my little boy was about 6 weeks old, and my wife got sick. And we thought it was it's just complications to labor, or to the baby come in, and she's having trouble breastfeeding, and there were the things that were some challenges. And we decided, it's just exhaustion, it's just dehydration. And so, one night she gets really sick, and the doctor says, I think you guys should go into the emergency room tomorrow and just get checked out. It's probably nothing, but just to be safe, go in and check things out. So we get in there the next day, and we think everything is fine. And we sit down, and they check her vital signs, and her blood pressure is like 90/60, and her heart rate is like 130, and she's developed this rash that we thought was because she wore wool socks, and it ended up, not being. And the doctor said, "Hey, we think this is, really serious." The ER doc said, "I think your wife has scarlet fever," and I'm thinking, isn't that the shit that Waltons used to get, like on the wagon train? And I will make a $100 donation to KW Cares every time I say an inappropriate word. So that's the first one. You guys can keep track. We'll go ahead and do that so I can kind of say whatever I want. Hopefully that's okay with you guys. So I'm sitting here having this experience. I'm like, scarlet fever, that's ridiculous. And he says, but I'm an ER doc, and as the Chinese would say, he has many swords, but none are very sharp, is what he told me. Maybe it's not scarlet fever then. So, we step out of the room, and I get back, I go to get some, take my little boy to do something, and we get back, and I've got a 6-week-old at the time, and I come back, and there's like 6 doctors in the room, and it looks like an episode of House. And one of them is an infectious disease doctor, and he said, something's happened, and this clogged milk duct that your wife got is turned into, to an infection, and it's spread through her body, and your wife is septic. And we got to take her to the ICU right away, and this is really, really serious. You need to take your little boy home, and he can't come back, and he can't continue. I mean, it's just this whole whirlwind. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. I probably need to go get on a Match.com profile because I'm not prepared to be a single dad yet. I'm kidding. No, so this is like I tell you this.
How about
I've never heard of the farm.
I love my profile on that.
So no, in all seriousness, like I've got all these things going on. Family stuff. Fortunately, there's my wife recovered beautifully. We have an amazing 2.5-year-old little boy, and we're having a little girl next month on August 31st. So there's a happy end to that story. But at the time, I'm sitting there looking at people leaving, my business unraveling. I've got all these costs and expenses still that were in place. My wife is sick. There's all this stuff going on, and I'm trying to figure out. There are days when you all experienced this before where you just want to pack it up. You just want to say, this isn't for me. I gave it a good run. And now, through some of the tools that we'll talk about, some of the lessons and mistakes that I made, I was able to step back and rebuild the business that I have today. And I can honestly say that the group of people that I have and the quality of our business and the level of profitability is way better than it ever was before. And I could not have gotten from where I was then to where I am now without experiencing that massive amount of failure, both personally and professionally. Because when you go through big experiences like that, it strengthens you, it strengthens your mindset, you pick up new tools, you learn things, because when we fail, we ponder, and those are some of the biggest things that have had an impact on me. So what I'd like to do now is transition and start to talk about some tactical things and some of the things that I learned, both as we are going from 80 deals to 225 deals, and then me having to take the next 2 years to rebuild my business to get back on track to where we are right now. So the first thing is size matters when it comes to your goals. Gary says to think as big as you possibly can and base what you do, how you do it, and who you do it with on succeeding at that level. And he took us through an exercise that I want all of you guys to do. So it looks like most of you have a piece of paper, and I'm going to ask you, so BHAG is an acronym for a big, hairy, audacious goal. I want you all to take a second and think, what is the craziest, largest financial or income goal, whether it's net worth, whether it's annual income. I want you to think crazy big on where you would ultimately like to be. Not tomorrow, not next year, not 5 years, but when you stop and you look back, what is that number that you will know you've reached your potential, that you've succeeded at a high level if you do that. So take a second and write that number down for me. Everybody got it? Now, double that number. And if doubling that number doesn't make you feel really uncomfortable, then the first number that you wrote down was too small. So he had us do this, and I remember we're sitting there, and Mark Spain is in the room. And for those of you with Keller Williams, you might know who Mark Spain is. He's, year before last, he was the top Keller Williams agent in the world. He does, over 1,000 transactions a year. If you ever had the opportunity to meet him, he's truly a world-class human being, just an absolutely great guy. And Mark was in the room, and so Gary called on Mark, and his was a transaction goal at the time, and he said, well, what's your goal, Mark? And at the time, I think Mark was doing maybe 350, 400 transactions. He said, I want to do 500 transactions a year. He said, you're thinking too small. And I'm sitting by Mark, and you can see him kind of start to twitch in his chair a little bit and get kind of uncomfortable. He said, you're thinking too small. I want you to think bigger. And he said, 750? That seems like a really big number. Nope, you're still thinking too small, Mark. He said, all right, 1,000 transactions. I want to do 1,000 transactions a year. And you can see, like, he says this number, and then it's a little bit uncomfortable because he's just said publicly that he wants to do 1,000 transactions a year, and Gary's calling him out in front of 100 of his peers and friends, and we're all in there together. And you talk to him about that experience today, because the rest of this story is now build your plan and the actions that you're going to take off of that second number that you wrote down when you doubled it. Because if you build a plan that will get you to that number, even if you fall a little bit short, you'll still be well beyond that goal that you wrote down of where you wanted to be when I first asked you the question. So here we are a couple years later, and Mark is doing, I think this year he'll do close to 1,500 transactions. Because he was willing to push his level of thinking, to think at a higher level, and then once he did that, he sat down and said, okay, now I need to create a plan to do that. So what does that look like? And then Gary also tells us if you start with a small goal, you'll take small actions and you'll end up living a small life. So create a big goal, create a big plan, take big actions, and lead a big life. Once you've created that big number and you've written down that and you've doubled it and it's hopefully a number that makes you feel really, really uncomfortable, that's your someday goal. What we're going to do is we're going to then break that down. So, okay, that's my someday goal. What's my 5-year goal? If I'm going to be there someday, where do I need to be in 5 years? And I'm going to be there in 5 years, where do I need to be a year from now? And if I'm going to be at that number a year from now, where do I need to be next month? And if I want to get there next month, what do I need to do this week? And if I'm going to be at that number this week, then what do I need to do today? So you start with the Sunday goal and you say, what's my 5-year, 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, and then today? And that's what he calls goal setting to the now. And that's how you can have this big, hairy, audacious goal, and instead of just sitting there and looking at it and having no idea how you're ever going to reach that, you can create a plan that brings you all the way down to what do I need to do today so that if I complete that today, I'll be on track to reach my weekly goal. So that if I reach my weekly goal, I'll be on track to achieve my monthly goal. And when I achieve my monthly goal, I'll be on track to achieve my yearly goal, which will put me on track to achieve my 5-year goal so that I'll be on my way to achieving my someday goal. So this exercise, goal setting to the now, is how you can take that big, hairy, audacious goal and start to break it down into manageable, bite-sized pieces. And then from there, we use the clarifying question. And those of you that have taken the one, or read the one thing, or have heard Gary speak, or talk about the book, you know that the clarifying question is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? Because there's always one thing that if you start on that, the next task is going to be easier or unnecessary. When we get into talking about leads and leverage, we're going to continue to hone it down. We started broad with mindset. We talked about experiencing failure, getting comfortable with that, setting big goals, and we're going to continue to narrow down so you guys can walk away from today with some tactical things that you're going to be able to leave and implement in your business. So you've set that goal, you've used the clarifying question to begin to identify, what do I need to be working on right now? And then from there, you're going to create your 1-3-5, which is also sometimes called a GPS. GPS stands for goals, priorities, and strategies. And you're going to use that to fill out a 411. Now, those of you guys that are with KW, you may already know what these forms are. For those of you that you don't, they're really simple forms. And the reason that we use these is because everybody on the team can be operating under the same system. I love reading books like 7 Habits, and there's a million different time management strategies out there. I got really into Tony Robbins, has one called The Time Your Life. So I was finding all these different systems and formats and trying to figure out how to implement them into the business. And the conclusion that I came to, that was one of the failures that I experienced, is that I needed something simple that I could force my people to actually use on a weekly basis, and that it was consistent throughout our entire organization. And so every year we sit down, we determine what our yearly goal is to get us on track for that 5-year goal so that we can reach our Sunday goal. We create our GPS. And what the 1-3-5 stands for is it's 1 goal, 3 priorities, and 5 strategies for each priority. And Amir can get you guys those forms. The KW has forms that you can just download. You don't have to create a specific form and just go in and fill it in. And so we would start with something like, okay, well, we want to do 250 transactions for $60 million in volume and 1.7 million in commission with an average commission of this. And so we start with that broad goal. And then we say, okay, if this is the goal, what are the priorities to help us achieve that goal? And then what are the strategies for each of those priorities that are going to get us there? And then once we do that, we look at all those strategies and all those priorities, and we match those up with particular people on the team. So if we want to create a new administrative system to improve the contract to close process, that's going to go on the 411 of my administrative assistant. But if we want to, hire 2 or 3 new agents, that's going to be my sales manager's responsibility. So she's going to put that as her goal. So all these yearly things that we need to accomplish then go into people's 411. So 411 stands for 4 weeks, 1 month, 1 year. At the top of it, you've got your yearly goals. And those are specific to you, not the organization. So you start with those yearly goals, and then you say same thing as goal setting in the now. Okay, well, if that's what I'm going to do this year, what do I want to do this month? And then what do I want to do each individual week? So every week when one of the people on my team that report directly to me come in, I sit down and we look at, all right, well, where are you on your 401? What's the thing that you want to accomplish this week so that you can be on track for your monthly goal so that you're then going to be on track for your annual goal? So that's how we utilize the 411. Any questions on this goal setting to the now process? This started to make sense for you guys? And I'll answer more questions at the end, but I just want to make sure you guys get this piece of it.
Sometimes we fall behind the 401, like if we get behind early on, and I want to understand your strategy of how do you stay on pace with your 401 if you see some setbacks?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think for us, the key is setting the initial goal that's high enough that even if you fall a little bit behind, that the number that you end up at, and that's what I did before. I would set what I knew was a really achievable goal, but it wasn't a stretch goal. And then if we fell behind, we were in trouble. So the way I changed it is we just started setting bigger goals, and therefore people were having to take bigger actions to get there. And so honestly, if they fall a little bit behind, we're still having good enough incremental growth. But if there's a critical issue, so that's one strategy. But the other thing that I tell you is it's just an ongoing conversation. So I'll say, hey, you said that you wanted to be, that you wanted your team to take 20 buyer rep agreements this month and put 15 houses under contract. I see that you're not there. Are you still committed to that goal? Is that still the right goal for your team, or does it need to be adjusted? Because sometimes it does need to be adjusted. But if it doesn't, I'll say, great. Well, then what do you need to do differently next month so that the result is in line with the goal that you set? And so it's that ongoing accountability. I'm not telling them what to do. I'm asking them what their thoughts are. I'm more of a thought partner for them in that conversation than I am an accountability partner or a boss or something like that. So we use these forms to make sure that we've got big goals, and then once we have a big goal, we've got a plan in place to achieve them. All right, so now we're going to take that and talk about lead generation. And before I said that leads and leverage are your key to ultimate success. But really, you can just break it down to lead generation. Lead generation is your one thing. For those of you before that, where you wrote down that big goal, and I said, all right, well, what do you need to be doing today or this month to be on track for that Sunday goal? It's going to be the same for everybody in this room. I don't care where you are in your business, whether you're doing $2 million a year or $102 million a year in volume, it's the same. Now, you might be lead generating for different things at that point, but it's always lead generation. So I've got another triangle here. Most of you guys, it might actually be, it's actually in this room. So who knows the pieces of this triangle? Go ahead and shout them out. Leads, listings, and leverage. You're always lead generating for one of those two things. You're lead generating for listings or you're lead generating for leverage. Regardless of where you are in your business, those are the two things that you focus on. And it's interesting, when we sit down with top producers, it always comes back to these two things. Brian, Brett, those of you that I've had, is that right?
Every time.
Does it ever change?
Gary never changes it.
Yeah.
Right.
The conversation always results. Now, when you get to a certain point in your business, it becomes more about lead generating for leverage than it does for listings. Because at that point, you've got your lead sources figured out. But when you're starting, you're lead generating for listings until you can get enough business going that you then need to switch and start lead generating for leverage. And then you never stop. You're always looking for more talented people, and you're always looking for new and bigger sources of business to keep those talented people up. So let's start with lead generating for listings. I pulled this chart. There's two types of lead generation. What are those two types? Prospecting, I heard somebody say, who said it? Prospecting, and what's the other one? Marketing. So we've got two types of lead generation, prospecting and marketing. Now the great thing about our business is there's a million different ways that you can lead generate in this business. This comes right out of MREA, so if you can't see it up there, then you can find it in a copy of MREA, and it basically splits them up into prospecting-based lead generation activities and marketing-based lead generation activities. And you see it break down. Most of you, when you're starting out, will start with prospecting-based lead generation activities. Why is that? Prospecting lead generation activities are cheaper. That's right, are free. It doesn't cost you anything but your time to go knock on doors, or to have meals with your allied resources, or to hold open houses, or to pick up the phone and call expireds. Those are all things that you can do without any cost. From there, you can start to, and I know for me, that's how my business started. I was 23 years old. I was living in an apartment. I had never even purchased a house before. My first clients were really, really bold to let me walk them through a process that I had never even been through before. I was in a town that I went to college in, but I didn't grow up in. So I had no family. I had no personal, professional relationships outside of the kids that I went to school with. And I'd walk into a real estate office and was forced to figure out how to. So I initially started with building a database. I got a coach, went through a group coaching program that I could afford, and immediately started to build a database to communicate with those people, so I could start to shake loose a couple people that would allow me the opportunity to take them through the home buying and selling process. And then from there, I would use the money that I made from those commissions to begin to market, so I could start to do more things. Maybe I could create a website at that point, or I could start mailing out to a geographic farm, or I could buy some internet leads from a Zillow or a Trulia. But the important thing to do is to look at these sorts of leads and decide what's going to work for you. One of the interesting things that we find is when we all sit down and we start talking about our businesses, everybody in the room is achieving at a very high level, but no two businesses look the same. No two organization charts look the same. People get their business and their leads from a number of different ways. So I can tell you that anything up there can work at a high level. You can get to a certain level with every single lead generation source that's up there. So it's all about figuring out which one works for you and which one will you actually do consistently enough to get the results that you need to get to the level that you want to get to. So I'll share with you what ours are. We've got this chart here, and you can see that 52% of our business comes from our past clients and sphere of influence. We've got a really good database. I've been doing this for a long time now, so I'm able to leverage those past clients. We communicate with them consistently. Our agents call them. We do client events. And so we're fortunate that we can typically count on, at the level that we're at right now, a little over 100 transactions a year coming from our past clients and sphere of influence and the past clients and sphere of influence from the people on our team. We get 13% of our business this year from agent referrals. Some of those are agents like you guys that I've met from being all around the country. Some of them is we have agents in our market that prospect for lots for builders, and so they'll find those lots, we'll take them to one of our builders, and then they'll refer that deal to us, and we'll pay them a referral fee on those. So we get a lot of business from agent referrals. About 11% of our business is from the internet, and 8% is from Dave Ramsey, and then FSBO Expired, Geographic Farm, Sign Call, and Open Houses. We are really investing now in our geographic farm because we feel like from looking at top agents that have business that we want to emulate, that's one of the top ways that we can go out and increase our market share and also control the houses. Because if it's all coming from Reading Geographic Farm, I know the area, I can keep it within a confined area within my office. I know the average sales price. So I really like that model. So we started farming about 18 months ago. My hope is that if I were to come back next year, that this would then be one of my top 2 or 3 sources of business. But what we find, and this is a really interesting point, is that most agents' business, the vast majority of it, over 75%, comes from 3 to 4 sources. No more than 3 to 4 sources. So they may have 15 sources or 20 sources that they are generating business from if you had to break down every deal that they had done, but they're probably getting the vast majority of their business from 3 to 4 sources. And I know for us this holds true. Our top 4 sources equal 84% of our total business. And for us, all of the prospecting, the FSBO expired, and internet, we're mainly doing those because we want to move those people in to become past client sphere of influence, so that database of past client, because those are the best deals. I spend about a fifth on my marketing to my past client and sphere of influence what I spend on internet, but yet I generate 10 times the amount of commission. The only reason that I have to do the rest of it is because my database isn't big enough yet that I can reach my ultimate goals or the potential that I want to be by just relying on that. So for us, in the geographic farm, the reason I like the geographic farm is because if you do it for long enough, consistently enough, it really becomes like a sphere of influence. It really becomes like another database. Those are maybe people that you haven't physically met in person, but they've been getting your mailings or your newsletters or your emails for a couple years. They've been dropping by events. They've seen your open house signs out. They've seen your yard signs out. So when they come to list, they feel like they don't feel a whole lot different than a past client or sphere of influence. We're finally getting to the point now, after about 1.5 years of mailing, that we'll have people call and say, hey, we want you to come out and list our house, which is not a whole lot different than when you have a past client that calls and says, hey, we're ready to buy or sell again. Obviously, we're going to use you. We asked Gary the last time we were together, if you were starting from scratch, doing what we're doing, what would your top sources be? And he said, well, for all of you, it should, in this room included, you've got to have a database. You're crazy if you're not building a database, communicating to that database, adding value to those people's lives so that you can be their real estate agent of choice. You can own the mind share for those people that you've worked with. So that's one thing. The second thing he said is I would go out and I'd create a geographic farm, and I'd pick that farm area, and he said, and I wouldn't just mail to them, I'd put people on the street, we'd door knock it, we'd be hosting community events, and I would make sure that I picked a big enough area with enough turnover that those people would think of me, and I'd be going door to door, and I'd be telling them to use my KW mobile app, so anytime they search for homes in the neighborhood, they were on my site, and I could track it, and I would treat that farm like a big database. They said, and then third, I would do the internet. And I'd make sure I had optimized my mobile app, and I had a great website that did everything I needed to do, where people could come to search for homes, and I could offer them online home evaluations and things like that. So his big three were database, geographic farm, and the internet. Now, it might be a little bit different for you depending upon where you are in your business and your personality, and all of you guys are a little bit different. So it's not about going out and finding the only 3 lead sources that work, because I said before, everything up there will work at a high level if you focus on it and doing it consistently. The biggest mistake that I see agents make is they pick something and they do it just long enough, and then they quit before it ever really starts working. And this stuff takes time. My farm, we had to be mailing to those people every month. We're mailing to 20,000 people. We had to be mailing to those people every month for a year before we really started to see results and before it really started to pay for itself. So I had to do it consistently enough. The same thing goes with FSBO expired. I see people all the time that say, oh, I tried FSBO expired and it didn't work. Well, I can show you some examples of people like Tim Heil in Austin that have built a massive business solely based off of prospecting. So all of those things work if you commit to a level of mastery at them, and you do them long enough to where you start to see results, and then you add leverage to it. So one of the things I want all you guys to think about before we wrap up today is, from that list of sources or what you're doing now, pick 2 or 3. And if you're newer in the business, pick one. Just pick one thing that you're going to commit to be the best in the world at, and go to work on that, and then add them as that starts to work. But don't go out there and try to do everything because you see other agents that have a blog and have an internet site and are door knocking and are calling FSBOs and expireds. Because if you do all of those things, you will not master any of them. So I did something special for you guys. Some previously confidential market research, and I hope that they might ask me to leave the building after this goes through, because they might not always share things like this with you guys, but I want you to know how some of the top agents in this market, I kind of figured out what are they doing, not just to generate it, but how did they actually then convert that business and what keeps people coming back. So Brian Gubernick apparently.
This is why you never make fun of a guy before he goes up on stage.
That's right. Yeah. Brian did that, and it's going to come back to haunt him. So Brian dresses really professionally when he's with you in the office, but apparently this is how he shows up to his listing presentation. And when you are that good looking with your shirt off, sometimes it's just a matter of showing up. So we always talk about there are no secrets to success. It's just hard work, and apparently that's Brian's secret to success. My creative director did that for me. That's actually not Brian with his shirt off, in case any of you guys are wondering. The other tip I would give you is don't search Google for shirtless male model. There's a lot of other stuff that comes up. I did find that photo, so that's Brian's key to success. And here, you guys all recognize this guy. It's the handsome-looking gentleman in the back there. The oldest mid-30s looking guy I've ever seen in my entire life. He classes himself up so much, he's got those silver tips that apparently a lot of his clients have actually confused him with the most interesting man. Yeah, so he just does that. And then, we've got these two guys here, and they're not even here today, so I can really pick on them, right? Apparently, they go for a different strategy. It's more of a sympathy close. From what I was able to determine, most of their clients end up working with them because they don't think that they can afford closed-toe shoes. So they see them and they figure out that they, obviously, they've got families and things like that. So this is just a little lightweight. You guys seem to be drifting off on me here a little bit. So I wanted to make sure you guys were all focused. That's a great photo of Brian. He actually took a picture of that. I bet he's going to post that on Facebook.
I did. I just sent it to my wife.
Setting the expectations high.
She said, tell that guy to come home today.
So the second is lead generate for leverage. Leverage is the truth that will set you free. We talked a lot about this last night. I got to have dinner with a few folks that were after I came in last night, and I was asking beforehand. I asked Amir. I said, figure out for me what the biggest challenges that people are facing in their business, based on where they are right now. What are the things that they really want to know information about? And everybody in the room was between about $5 million and $10 million in total volume. And I read through the list of email, and they were saying, here's where they are in their business, here's what their team looks like, and here's what they want to learn more about. And interesting enough, every single one of them was all about leverage. How can we add more leverage? How can we, we need to get one really great assistant. And so we're going to overview a couple of specific things on leverage here. Leverage is difficult for a lot of us when you first start because it requires you to think like a business owner as opposed to a salesperson. Most of us did not get into this industry to own a business. Most of us got into it because there wasn't a cap on how much income we could make, and it was a flexible job, and we were our own boss. Those are the things that a lot of times initially encourage somebody into the real estate industry. But once they get into it, if they choose to take that business to the next level, they find that they've actually got to be a business owner. And that's a different hat for a lot of us to wear. So we've got to master leverage, and the first part of that is beginning to think like a business person. So one of the things that I always tell people, that Gary always tells us, and that I always like to share when I'm with a group like you, is the gap between where you are now and where you ultimately want to be is always a who question. It can always, always, always be solved by a who. We were talking last night, somebody said, well, I need systems, or I need a new process for this. And Gary will always stop us and say, wait a second, who needs systems? And what's the answer to that? Your team, your people. It's not you, because if you hire the right person, if you find the right who, they will create the system, they will do the things necessary to get you to the next person. So when you start succeeding at higher and higher levels and your business is growing, it always becomes a who question. So it becomes about mastering leverage and really understanding at a high level what that looks like. One of my favorite Gary Keller stories is he's talking about building wealth. And he's like, I've been really successful. I own a lot of great businesses. I've made some amazing investments in real estate. I'm sure he's got a stock portfolio and all sorts of different investments. And he said, and I don't care what investment it is or how successful you are in those investments, no investment that you ever make will make me more money, will make you more money than Mark Willis has made me. And for those of you that know, Mark Willis was the CEO of our company for over a decade, took our company to over 100,000 agents. And so that's Gary's story about, go find your, instead of going out and investing or spending, all your time on finding some new system or some new lead generation source, once you get to a certain level, it becomes 100% about finding the next who, determining who's going to take you from where you are now to where you ultimately want to be in your business. So this is our organization chart. You can see it's split up between the, I have 4 people that report directly to me. I have a director of lead generation. She kind of runs our inside sales team. She has our marketing manager, our creative director, and our marketing manager, creative director is a part-time person for us. She works about 25 hours a week for us. We have 2 inside sales specialists. Those people are VAs, and they do some outbound calling, but they mainly will do lead cultivation, lead follow-up, and help us manage the lead flow to get appointments set for the agent team. We have 2 client care specialists. I made that move this year. We parted ways with the person that was running the operations side of our business before, and instead of hiring 1 person to replace them, I went to more of an emerging talent, newer person into the industry, and I decided to hire 2 people. Because you'll see, my goal is to get big enough to where there's never only 1 person doing any role, so that if that person leaves, I've got a talent bench. I've got a group of people that I can go to, and I'm cultivating the people on my team, so that I've always got somebody that's pushing from the bottom, that's wanting more opportunity, that I can promote as we grow. We have 3 transaction coordinators that report to our 2 client care specialists, and those are also virtual assistants, and they do all of our transaction coordination. So I was explaining that last night. Anything that does not require a conversation with the cooperating agent or a conversation with the client, the virtual assistants do. So chasing down signatures, turning in contract paperwork, setting up the inspections, sending out the template emails. We've got a list of probably 150 things we do from the time a contract is executed through closing, and we've narrowed it down that really only about 20% of those have to be done by our client care specialists. So we limit them to the most important things so they can be communicating with the clients. That way the clients aren't calling the agents, and all the busy work and detail we're able to leverage off to a virtual assistant. We've got a courier that does all of our running around, and then we've got a listing coordinator, and our listing coordinator does, anytime we take a listing, she goes to the house, sign in the yard, does the photos, all the measurements, inputs it into MLS, initiates all the online marketing for the search portals and things like that, and then gets it into the showing service. And that person, we pay her $325 a listing. So she is also more of a contract employee, but as our listing volume has grown, she really only works for us, and it allows her to have a little bit more flexibility. And then I have a sales manager and 5 additional agents. And this time last year, it was me, my sales manager, and 1 other agent. So we've grown a lot this year, and that's been my big aha. As we're talking about bigger is better, the more people that we can get, as you're building a big business, as I look at top agents and their companies, most of them look like small brokerages. And all of you might not have that goal. Your goal might not be to get to, to $5 million a year in commissions or $100 million in closed volume. That's why I had you write down your individual numbers, because your path may look different, but it's always interesting to look at people's organization chart to see how they're structured. The cool thing is, if you pull the top agents in the room up here and we all put our organization charts up there, all of them would look different. There's no one organization chart that is the magic fit. And when Gary talks about MREA and kind of lays out the different steps, he says, MREA is a Frankenstein. It is a bunch of people that we gathered their data together and we looked to normalize it as much as we could so that we came up with one model. But when you really dig into it, everybody's a little bit different, and that's okay. It's not that everybody should look exactly like the MRA model. It's that if you vary from there, you need to know why. And there's different reasons that it might be because of the types of lead sources that you service, or it might be because the geographic market that you're in. So take those models and figure out what works for you. Now, one thing that I was telling people last night, when you look at my organization chart, this year we're on track to do between 200 and 250 deals and about $60 million in volume. And I probably have more people, especially on the inside sales and admin team, than I need to be able to do that. But my big aha was that I wanted, if I was going to take my extra money and invest it in people, because I want to build a bench so that as we continue to dump more leads in and we continue to grow, that I've got more opportunity and more people that I've been grooming up to take on bigger roles on the team. Can somebody give me a time where we are now on time?
12:25.
And what are we supposed to go to?
12:30.
12:30. Are you guys okay if we run a little bit over? Is that all right? Because I've got some other things I want to get through. So I'll try and speed up a little bit. So effective leverage, what does that look like? One, Recruit Select. For those of you that are with KW, you know what Recruit Select is. For those of you that are not, it's a class that we offer that's all about leverage. Leverage is not something that comes to people naturally. You have to have a proven process to implement to be able to do it at the highest level. I told the story yesterday that my first assistant quit after lunch the first day. She made it through about 3 or 4 hours, came back and decided that that wasn't for her. Now part of it was probably because I was a disaster. I didn't really know what I needed. I just thought it'd be, I knew I needed something, but I didn't know what. So when you're hiring your first assistant, it's really, really important that you get a system in place and that you implement a proven process, and Recruit Select is the best process out there for that. And Gary tells us you need to take it 12 times. You need to go to school on Recruit Select, because every time you take it, it's like passing one more grade. So if you've taken it 3 times, congratulations, you're a 3rd grader in Recruit Select. And he says if you want to be in his mastermind, you've got to take it twice a year, every year for the rest of your life, until you start teaching it, and then you need to start teaching it on an ongoing basis. So I've taken it 7 times now, 8 times, and every time I go, I learn something different, I improve on our process, and now, since I have my 4 people that report to me, now I'm sending my people. My key people are going with me, so that as they're making their hires, we can talk about the process and we're all on the same page. So implement a process, implement Recruit Select. Build your talent bench. I got a picture of the Golden State Warriors here, the NBA champions this year. I see we got one Golden State Warriors fan back there. And the reason I put the Golden State Warriors up there is because the MVP of the series for Golden State came off the bench. He was not one of their starters. I don't know if that's ever happened before. Maybe it has. I'm not a big stats guy. But when I read that story, that the MVP of the finals was not even one of their starters, what does that say about the guys that they have on the bench working for them? They've got top talent that they can bring in playing at the highest level. And so we need to think that same way for our businesses. Who are you guys going into business with? A lot of times, your success is only going to increase to the level of the people around you. So if you're hiring low quality, low level people, you're never going to get past what their natural ceiling of achievement is. And you look at somebody like Gary Keller and all the people that he's put around him, and he tells us you've got to be able to live from a world of promotion. And what he means by that is, if you hire somebody from the outside and bring them in, especially if they're one of your key members of your team, it's going to take them 2 years to really be able to own and run that job and build your world bigger. So if you don't have that person now, you're 2 years away from them being to operate at the level you need them to operate at to get you to where you ultimately want to go. So you better be looking for those people earlier than you think that you need them, and you better be saving your money so that you can go out and you can pay the good people enough to get them early on. And that was a big lesson for me, and that's why we decided, you know what, I'd like to be doing some more investing in different things, but I decided that over the next couple of years, my investments are going to be in people, because I want to have enough people on my team. Not all of them are going to succeed at the highest level, right? If you look at those huge teams, they might have 25 or 30 people, and averaged out, they might only be doing 2 deals a month apiece on average. But all of them have their people that are doing 5, 6, 7 deals a month. But you're not going to find a team of 25 where they're all doing 5, 6, 7 deals a month. There's just not that many people that are succeeding at that level in any given market. So it's about getting big enough that you're identifying your leaders, you're growing them from within your business, so that when you're ready, when you have an opportunity available, you've got somebody on the bench that can step in to get you where you ultimately want to be. So compensation, Sorry, my PowerPoint slide's a little off here, but gross compensation is, this is the formula for Mil-Morier. It's 100% GCI, 30% cost of sale, 30% expenses to 40% net profit. Now, one of the things that I learned is that not everybody is in that people have varying levels of profitability, and there's a couple different things that can affect that. So one is your average sales price. If somebody, it's a lot easier to reach 40% net profitability if your average sales price is $500,000 or $600,000. So you've got to be looking at, what market am I in? The next thing is, what are your lead generation sources? If the majority of your business is coming from past client sphere of influence, and you're not having to spend as much money marketing to those people, then it's easier to reach that as well. The other thing is your business a majority buyers versus majority sellers? If you've got agents on your team, typically your cost of sale, the money that you're paying out on the listing, is going to be less than the money that you're paying out on a buyer. So if I give an agent on my team a listing, I'm only going to pay them 25%, or on a buyer, we pay out 45%. So my cost of sale on the listing side of my business is lower than the buyer side of my business. Therefore, if I do 70% buyers and only 30% listing, my cost of sale is going to be higher than if I do more listings. So we're looking at the majority buyer, majority seller. Do you have an inside sales department? If you've got somebody that's cultivating leads and generating opportunities for the agents on your team, that's an added cost. So it's either going to be an expense or cost of sale that could affect profitability. And then also, are you in production? For me, when I stepped out of production, when I was still doing listings, I was getting 100% of the commission on each of those listings. Once I stepped out, now I'm paying that listing specialist on every single one of those listings, and so that affected my cost of sale. So the same thing as I was saying with the organization chart, there's no right or wrong. I mean, you've got to be netting enough money that you're fulfilling your goals, but if you're at 30% as opposed to 40%, but you're out of production, you're focusing on the business, there's not anything wrong with that. It's just all about knowing why you're off from the model. If you're off from the model, make sure that you can explain why. So I have agents tell me that all the time. Well, I'm not netting 40%. And sometimes it's because they're spending way too much money. Other times it's because they are paying their agents way more than they should be. But sometimes it's just because they've built a good enough business that they're able to focus on other opportunities. And if that's the case, who's to say that it has to be 40%? So on our team, our agents, we pay out, as I said before, we pay out 45% on the buy side, and that gets split. 5% of that goes to our sales manager, and currently 40% goes to the agents that are working the deals. We pay out 25% on the listing side. And then our admin are salaried, so we have a flat salary for admin, as well as our inside salesperson. Our inside salesperson makes a salary plus a performance-based bonus based on how many opportunities she sets up on a monthly basis. So we don't have it, since we're running short on time, I'm not going to get into too much detail on compensation, but I'll tell you the mistakes that I made that I want you guys to be able to learn from. Is if you pay out too much to start with, it's almost impossible to offer a takeaway. To go back and say, oh, well, things are changing, so I'm going to take more. So if you're going to start somewhere, start on the low side. People are always happy if you give them more commission. But what we did is we started with a system that didn't allow us to grow. We were at a place to where we could not then afford to turn around and add an inside sales department. And we couldn't afford to add the additional administrative leverage that we needed because our cost of sale was so high to start with that we didn't have any room. If I did that, I would have been at little to no profitability. So fortunately, when that was one of the greatest things about my business basically having to completely change, is that I had a do-over. I was able to pick how I wanted to do it differently the next time. So I went back and I went the opposite. They talk about being able to pay up to 50% out on the buy side, which in a lot of markets is necessary depending upon what your average sales price is. Our average sales price is about $275, and our agents were still able to make the money that they wanted to make by me paying about 40% because we have really great leverage for them. They can depend upon our inside sales department. They can depend upon our client care specialists. They're not having to worry about all those things. Their expenses are paid for them. So a couple compensation tips is when recruiting somebody, don't talk splits, talk standards and expected income. When you're interviewing with our team, we're not going to tell you, oh, you're going to get, you're going to start off and you're going to get 20% of the transaction while you're just showing houses. And then you're going to earn the right to get, to negotiate your own contracts. You're getting the other 5% from that. So ours is tiered for new agents, but we don't get into that initially because we want them to, we would rather sit down and say, if you do the activities that we're going to tell you to do, and you meet our minimum standards, you should expect to make between $70,000 to $80,000 your first year. And so most of them, they might have been making double the split that they were before, but weren't even making that much money. Because price is only an issue in the absence of value. When you start talking splits immediately, that totally undermines the value that you're going to provide. So we're going to sell them on the value that our team brings, the leverage that we offer, and then what they can expect to make based on the other people on our team. Compensation model. So there's a number of different ways to compensate people, and there's some great information out there on this already if you want to dig deeper into it. But your basic models are commission, salary, excuse me, salary plus commission, salary plus bonus. You could have profit share, and then you could have hourly. For us, most of our administrative people, hold this till the end. I know you have some questions, and I'll leave a couple minutes for those of you that can stick around a little bit afterwards. But most of our administrative people are on salary based, our virtual assistants are on hourly based, and then our agents are on commission. Now what I've started doing with like my director of inside sales, Legion and inside sales, she's on a salary, and then I'm bonusing her based on an increase in net profitability. So I looked at, okay, here's what we did last year in net profitability. Here's what we want to do this year. So if you help me get to there, then I will share that increased net profitability with you so we can get you from your base salary to where you ultimately want to be. A couple things on leadership, and I'm going to cut out some of these because we're probably out of time at this point. Everything rises and falls on leadership. John Maxwell in the 21 Laws of Leadership, what's the first law? Anybody know? The law of the lid. So it's all about your business will only grow to the capacity that you as the leader can take it to. And Gary tells us that one of the challenges that we face is what we call seagull management. We hire our first people, we're not great leaders, we come in, we make a lot of noise, we dump on everything, and then we fly back out. And that originally came from Ken Blanchard, I believe it was from the 1 Minute Manager book, but it's that idea of seagull management. And so what we know is that everything rises and falls on leadership. So from anybody that's taken Recruit Select, what's the definition of leadership that they tell us in Recruit Select? Anybody know? All right, so the first thing that tells me is you guys need to go take Recruit Select. And what the definition is teach people how to think so they can do what they need to do to get what they want. What I'll tell you about leadership is nobody's going to get excited about helping you reach your goals. You set a big goal that's going to get you to where you ultimately want to be, and you roll it out to your team, and you're going to say, hey guys, this is our big goal, this is where we're going to go, now go do it. Nobody cares about what your goals for your business are and what you're going to get when you get there. Good leaders figure out what their people want, and then they figure out how they can be a vehicle for those people's success. And the way that they do that is they follow this definition. They teach their people how to think so their people can do what they need to do to go out and get what they want, not what you want. So when Gary talks about it, he said, for me, I know that if I have this big goal, instead of trying to convince my people to go out and get it, I go out and look for people that have big goals as well. So when he hired Mark Willis had a big goal. And Gary knew, okay, great. If I help Mark achieve his goal, then my goal will be met along the way. That's a critical piece for everybody to understand is if you have people on your team now, or as you add people in the future, go out and figure out what it is that they want. Does talent see you as a vehicle for their success? I said, you've got to figure out what they want and then help them to get there. So you need to make sure that you're doing what that takes. Gary tells us that no one succeeds alone and no one fails alone. So the keys, a couple quick tips on becoming a better leader is create a personal and professional development plan to become the type of leader that people want to work for. He said, go out and be the person that top talent would want to come and work for. Create that sort of culture, create that sort of environment, create that sort of business. And when you do that, recruiting becomes a lot easier. It's no longer a job. Now we're to the point, not always, but we have people that say, hey, I've heard great things about your team and your business. If you have a position open, I'd like to come work there. I'd like to be able to be considered a candidate for that position. Hire a coach and then become a coach. For anybody in the room that doesn't have a coach, we're blessed through Keller Williams that we've got MAPS. And MAPS is the best coaching organization on the planet. every single one of you guys should have a MAPS coach. And then you should learn to go out and become a coach, to coach the people on your team, to coach the people that you're in business with, to be able to mentor new agents. The great thing about coaching is it's like practicing on somebody else's kids. You can go out there and you can learn the things and you can help ask great questions and you can teach those people how to think. And so go out and hire a coach and then become a coach. And then figure out what that talent really wants. The last thing I had was on culture. And what I'm going to do is I've got a couple videos that I was going to show, but since we're already over on time, and I know they've probably got lunch out there. Amir, is lunch already?
Lunch is ready.
All right, so I don't want to hold you guys up anymore, but the last thing I've got is I've got a couple videos, and so maybe if you guys want to come back in here during lunch, I'll show them, or I'll send out links to those.
All the TVs will have the videos playing if you want.
Cool, so we can play a couple of those videos, but this is the really big thing that we took away, is that as our business started to grow, and I went through that whole change and shift in our business, I found that we didn't have a very good culture, that we weren't celebrating our successes, I wasn't leading the way that I should, I wasn't figuring out what the people on my team wanted, and then figuring out how to help them, how to get there. And I just wasn't doing the things that I wasn't raising my own leadership lid. So I basically went to school on what it was going to take to be a person like that. And we defined our culture. We talked about what we wanted to stand for in our marketplace. When somebody came to work with us, what sort of experience did we want them to have? What do we want that to look like? And then we went out and started a charity. For those of you that were at our family reunion this year, we had Adam Grant there. And Adam Grant wrote a really great book called Give and Take. And it's about being a giver and the value of being a strategic giver. So he challenged all of us to go out there and start a charity and contribute at a higher level, because that can be really disruptive in your market. How many agents do you know that have their own charity in your marketplace? So we did that as well. So I've got two videos. One is kind of our About Us video, and it talks about the things that, what we stand for, what our values are. It's got interviews with our clients. And I've got another one with one of the projects that we did with our charity. So we might be able to play those during lunch, and if not, I'm going to send out a link for those of you guys that want that so you can have it. So last thing, I'm going to just scroll through this to get to the bonus material, is if you'll do two things. If you will like us on Facebook or Instagram, or follow us on Instagram, and that's facebook.com/Armstrong Real Estate Group, and then Instagram.com/Armstrong Real Estate. If you will go on and do that, and then you will email info@armstrongrealestate.com with the word bonus material in the subject line, we will send you a link to some cool stuff. I'll send you those two videos. I'll send you some systems that we use. We have a really good client intake form that we use during a buyer consultation. We have a list of pre-listing questions that we ask. And I've also got our sheet that we fill out, that our VAs fill out for our contract to close, so those systems. So I'll send you a couple of those things that you guys could have, which will hopefully give you some ideas on some additional systems that you can implement in your own businesses.